What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Kamen Rider Build episode 31. This episode is called Surging Magma, and this episode overall was really good. It gave us a lot more background on who Ryoga is, his origins, and all that kind of stuff, which is very important. It also introduced us to his new mode that he'll be using from now on, probably for the majority of the rest of the show, which is Kamen Rider Cross Z Magma, which is a very cool mode. He showed it off in this episode, and I thought it was just really great to see him battle finally. Keep that in mind. Does that mean that there will not be another mode? No, there could be one more mode for him. As of now, there's nothing completely solidified as to whether or not that will happen, but there have been images popping up that do kind of give you some sense that there might be a chance of Ryoga getting one more mode, but there's no name to it so far. So don't hold me to that, and don't hold anyone to that until we really know for a fact. But I did see images a while back talking about this. So keep that in mind. There is a chance that Ryoga might get another form. Anyway, this episode overall, like I said before, was really good. It starts off with the continuation of the previous episode. And we also get to learn something very important about a character that we've been thinking is a bad guy, but turns out he's actually doing something for a good reason, though we're not really sure if he's good, but like maybe his motives are good in the certain situation. We'll get into that in this episode fairly early on, but I wanted to bring it up right up front because it is an interesting thing to note that I'm sure not everyone was expecting to see in this episode, but it kind of helps us establish now that Sento and the others know something that is not common knowledge to the rest of the world after this episode, though they're still a little bit more uncertain as to whether or not what is said is true. So we'll get into that in this episode. Again, I'm kind of hinting at things without giving things away right now, but there's a bunch of things that do happen. If you're wondering about my voice or how I'm sounding right now, I'm actually a little sick, so just keep it in mind if you're wondering why I sound a certain way. It's just because of that. So anyway, this episode begins with us seeing that Sento and the others are fighting inside of the big Pandora Tower. We actually see that, Sento and the others are fighting off against the Washio Bros, and that's going okay. Ryoga manages to take out the Gear Engine Bro, I believe, and then the Gear Engine Bro ends up tossing the bottle to the remote control bro so that he can do the Hell Bros form and all that. So that's very important to keep in mind. At the same time, what does end up happening is that the layout of the area transforms. So suddenly it takes on the form of a beach. At that point, Gentaku arrives on the scene. Yes, Gentaku is the one that I was talking about before, that we learned something kind of important from him, and we'll get into that in this episode. What does end up happening in the meantime is that Mizora and Sawa are doing more research on Ryoga. We get to learn a bunch of things about who Ryoga is, his origins, his past, how he came to be, and all that kind of stuff. For example, we actually learned that apparently Ryoga's mom and dad, what happened was that they were working for Namba Heavy Industries years prior, and during the Mars incident that happened, there was also a probe incident that occurred where there was an unmanned ship that brought back some form of life, but it was unknown to the people that there had been this sort of unknown Martian life aboard the ship, and it was just some sort of small form of life. And what had happened was that his mother, Ryoga's mother, had actually been on site when the probe arrived, and suddenly the little Martian bit of life actually traveled into her system and got her pregnant a month into her pregnancy. The thing is that somehow a month later she gave birth to Ryoga, meaning that she only had to deal with pregnancy for 2 months before she had given birth, which is obviously not realistic in real life because pregnancy lasts 9 months. So that's very important to keep in mind, that clearly the Martian life is way advanced as far as how pregnancy works, because the fact that they were able to get so far ahead is like, what's going on here, right? So that's very important to keep in mind, of course. So at the same time, this is all going on. We also learned about the fact that Ryoga had to undertake several different tests, and these tests were to see like how he came to be. I mean, he was a perfectly healthy person, and he was not ill at all when he was born. Like, you know, being born that early, you would normally think he would have certain health defects or something like that. No, his health was at like pristine. His health was pristine. Like he was not in bad shape or anything. He was as if he was a normal baby born without any issues at all, and that's a very important thing, of course. So that's all brought up. And you also have to remember that when the being went into her system, she ended up passing out and being left on the ground, similar to Mizura's situation where she was found on the ground with the bangle on her arm. So again, it's all about these kind of Martian life being brought to the Earth and then suddenly transferring their essence to another being. So in his case, a Martian being transferred his essence to Ryoga, which means that Ryoga kind of shares his DNA with probably someone from Mars and also from Earth. So in other words, he's half Martian, basically. That's what you can kind of imply here. He's not full-on Martian, he's half Martian. We don't know what that being was. It could just be some random person from Mars, or it could be someone of royalty or someone of significance that their DNA was able to travel into Ryoga's mother's system. We don't know anything about that, but it is still important to keep that in mind, that clearly he is of some Martian blood, and that's the important thing to keep in mind. So what we do end up knowing as well is that he was given several different tests during the time that after he was taken, all the way throughout his childhood until his parents passed away. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, in the meantime, what does end up happening is that Sento ends up having to fight the Hellbros. He actually uses the tank mode to deal with the Hellbros, which he does pretty easily. And then what happens is that he ends up using the rabbit mode to fight against Rogue. And that's actually a very interesting thing. Now what does end up happening is that Ryoga does try to fight Rogue. Initially, it doesn't work out very well, but when Sento does, there's a conversation that occurs where Gentaku explains the fact that Mido, the Prime Minister of Saito, is not the same Prime Minister that you see. It's not Mido anymore. It is Namba who is using his face. And the thing is that Gentaku explains this to Ryoga, to Sento. Basically says, you need to get the Pandora's box. I was going to use the Pandora's box to unite the country and save it, because Namba's going to use it to take over the world. And so the thing is that all this is done, and he explains that if I do anything funny, or if I say anything funny right now and they catch me on camera, they have a small device implanted into my body that can go off at any moment and they can kill me. So I need you to do this for me. And so what happens is that he says, do the finishing blow. And so at that point, Sento has to do a finishing blow with his rabbit mode. And at that point, Gentaku detransforms and gets left on the ground. So at that point, they have to then go and get the Pandora's box. And now they know that the Prime Minister of Saito isn't the same Prime Minister they've seen on TV, the same one that they've been hearing about as of late. That Prime Minister is gone. So that's very important, but at the same time, they are uncertain as to whether or not that is an absolute fact, but they are going to trust him for at least now. So that's very important to remember. This does imply that Gentaku is somewhat in a better position as far as being nice, although we're not really sure if his intentions are truly for good, or if it's more so just that he's trying to prevent someone else from causing trouble. So we don't really know the specifics, but it does seem to be like he's willing to help out in some capacity, and that's still good. That's still a really good thing. What does end up happening as well is that what was I going to say? Something. I was going to say something very important. But yes, so that's very important to note about Gentaku, that we know this. We also learn, because Gentaku explains to Ryoga that when it came to his, fiance to be, Kazumi and all that, the reason, though she was killed, this was done by Stark to make, Ryoga increase his anger and build up his hazard level, and Stark wanted to do this that was his main goal. His main goal is to increase his strength. So there's obviously a greater deal of significance here, and it wasn't like Gintaku was doing it because he wanted to do it. He was doing it because Stark instructed him to do it. So that's very important to keep in mind, that now we understand that aspect of things, that apparently Stark was the mastermind behind that whole thing, and we knew that, but it's also important for Ryoga because now Ryoga has a little bit more trust in Gintaku, because initially Gintaku blamed Ryoga blamed Gintaku for Kazumi's death. Yes, for Kazumi's death, when in reality the one to blame was Stark. So now he can trust him again a little bit more. Now, does that mean he's outright going to be like, we're friends or something like that? Definitely not. But he's not going to blame him for someone that he cared about so dearly anymore, her death, as much, because it wasn't because he wanted to do it. It was because he was being instructed to do it, and it was a different mentality. So that's very important to keep in mind. Eventually, what does end up happening is that Sento and the others head off. They end up arriving into another location where we end up seeing Sento and the others transform. They end up seeing Stark, and they also, what happens is that some clone Smash are summoned. And these Smash are different because these ones have no body. So you know how in past situations when it comes to Smash monsters, typically the Smash monsters would turn into a human or something like that after they're destroyed. There's no body, which means that they can't feel pain, and they're just shells of these bodies. So that's very important to consider. They don't feel pain. They can get destroyed, but they're not. But their strength is pretty durable. So that's a very important thing to keep into consideration. So that all happens. In the meantime, what we do end up seeing is that Stark wants Ryoga to continue to get stronger. There's fighting that occurs between him and Stark. He does what happens is that at one point Kazumi gets knocked into a wall, and then he is knocked out for a while. In the meantime, we end up seeing Sento fighting some of the clone Smash, and then we end up seeing that Ryoga ends up unleashing his true self, and that leads to Stark being very, very happy. And the other thing that's mentioned eventually is that the trans steam system that he's been using with his weapon to transform into Bloodstark isn't his true form. This is only a small part of it, and eventually he'll have a bigger form. So that's very important to consider, because that plays more into the idea of him being Kamen Rider Evil, which is something that people have been suspecting for quite some time. I've mentioned it several times over. People are just in general suspecting it, and from the last episode where we saw the dark half of Suichi, we could tell that there's not just one being that exists within Suichi's body. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind, of course. So that's something to remember. Now, what does end up happening is that eventually Ryoga does end up using the Magma Knuckle, and he uses the bottle, which finally transforms into its proper mode so that he can use it to take on the form of Kamen Rider Cross the Magma. And that's a very cool thing. We see several different attacks unleashed by him. He just in general looks amazing, and I just think that it's a really cool battle that occurs between him and Stark. And eventually Stark is knocked to the ground, and it's just a really cool scene. Now, what we do end up hearing is that apparently that Stark is looking for the ultimate driver, and now that he has a perfect vessel, he's getting that much closer to reaching his goal. So what that kind of makes me think is that Stark's goal here is to unleash Ryoga so that he can become, at his greatest hazard level. Maybe what will happen is that dark half will inhabit Ryoga's body, and then he'll get this ultimate driver, whatever that is, to exist within Ryoga, and so that way he'll have the ultimate strength from his hazard level and the ultimate strength from the driver, and then he can just completely destroy the world. So that's probably what I'm kind of guessing is going on here, because why else would Stark be doing this? Because he mentions this whole entire aspect of the ultimate driver, which more likely than not, might be Evol's driver, but it also could be Sento's final mode form. So that's very important to consider, because Sento will have a final mode at some point. We are into episode 31 now, so some point in these next 10 episodes or so, I would imagine the final mode for Sento will be unveiled. So yes, the Rabbit and the Tank modes are not the final modes, but they're definitely laid into the story modes that we'll be having. So keep it in mind. I definitely want to know more about what's going to happen with this Ultimate Driver. Can't wait to know what we'll learn from here. Eventually, Ryoga ends up grabbing Kazumi, and what ends up happening is that Sento and the others jump out of the Pandora Tower to kind of recover and talk about things, and what happens is that Ryoga and Kazumi get into a little fight. In the meantime, we also see that Mizora and Sawa are having conversations, discussing different things about Ryoga. And one of the last things that's mentioned is the fact that regarding the test, there was secrecy to keep things hidden from him so he didn't remember things, and he may have had his mind wiped to some extent so he wouldn't remember things, or he just may have kept it secret from the others. So what we do end up learning as well is that apparently the one that did research on Ryoga during the time that he was being tested was actually Katsuragi's father. So Katsuragi's father, being obviously Sento's real father, is a very important thing to consider. He was one of the men behind the Mars mission, and the fact that he has this whole entire connection to it, and the fact that Sento's father has this connection, is really important, because they're all connected now in some way. They're more connected than they even thought they were connected. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really crazy thing to believe that everyone is really, really connected. It's just crazy to believe that there's so many different connections that are brought up in different ways and different angles and perspectives, and you just have to think to yourself, like, wow, like, they really, like, got it all figured out here, As far as things go with the preview, we will be seeing more of Cross the Magma. There is going to be discussion regarding the fact that Katsuragi's father was the one that did research on Ryoga, and that will obviously lead to some pretty interesting story developments. I am interested in the Ultimate Driver. That will be something I'm sure will be brought up several times throughout the rest of this, until he eventually gets the Ultimate Driver, or whoever it does gets it. We'll have to wait and see. It is possible that Sento will be the one to actually create the driver. We don't know how the driver will work yet, so keep that in mind as well. Could be something made by Namba Heavy Industries. It's very hard to say as of now, but all this information and more is very interesting to hear. They finally know the fact that Namba is inhabiting the Prime Minister's body or face, so keep that in mind. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.